Hello and welcome back to another document deep dive. This time we will look at some documents about how to defeat those pesky Russian tanks. This is all from early 1942 by the 3rd Panzer Division. Although one of them is from a Jäger division that was attached to them or in the same corps as them. And it's from the time between the first and second battle of Kharkov, and it's actually there in Ukraine near Kharkov, where these experiences were made. And this is quite an interesting time because this is when the T-34 still ruled the battlefield and was basically a super tank. So that's quite interesting. So here are the experiences that they made and compiled. So it says up here, 3rd Panzer Division. This is the date, 7th of April 1942, and it's an anti-tank combat report. And it starts here with anti-tank combat using our own tanks. The inferiority of German tanks compared to the T-34 became apparent once again in recent fighting. This was also evident to our infantry units. The T-34 surpasses both the Panzer III and IV in armor protection, off-road mobility, and armament, specifically its accurate and long-range gun. In tank duels, it is clearly superior. It can open fire from distances at which our tanks still have no realistic chance of success. A notable disadvantage is the poor accuracy of the Panzer IV at longer ranges. Note that this is still the short-barreled version of the Panzer IV. Right, while its 7.5 centimeter armor-piercing shell, or they say here Rotkopf red-tip grenade, has proven effective at close range. As previous experience has shown, it is less reliable at a distance. I wonder if this is a heat grenade or some kind of APCR. I think the 75 millimeter shotgun mostly was effective with heat grenades. So some kind of special ammo. Now we go into the actual battle that we will look at today. The success on March 29th, 1942, when 9 enemy tanks were destroyed, was only made possible by deploying our tanks against both flanks of the enemy, securing an especially advantageous position. Additionally, other anti-tank weapons contributed to this concentrated fire. The immediate counterattack, meme here, by tanks and infantry appeared promising due to the heavy losses suffered by enemy tanks and accompanying infantry. However, the advance was halted just a few kilometers later by individual T-34s positioned at key points which our tanks could not reach. This reflects a characteristic pattern of Russian tactics. Tanks are always used to cover the disengagement of their forces during setbacks. Of the 9 tanks destroyed on March 29, only 2 were T-34s. This could only be confirmed upon close inspection, as BT tanks and T-34s are externally quite similar. Therefore, the belief that every attacking tank is a T-34 must be strongly countered. I find this quite interesting because there's this meme in the World War II enthusiasm community that every tank is a Tiger. Apparently, at this point, every tank was a T-34. Anyway, there's recommendations. So if you need tips for whatever game you're playing, recommendations for tank deployment in anti-tank defense. Keep tanks in reserve as a mobile strike force. Deploy them in a concentrated assault on the flanks of enemy tanks once the direction of attack is known. Ensure timely tank alerts, rapid deployment readiness, and prior reconnaissance of covered approach routes. Side attacks with both 7.5 cm and 5 cm long-barreled shells are effective, and focused fire on individual enemy tanks is essential. Now, it carries on here. Anti-tank defense using anti-tank guns, PAC. The light anti-tank gun with Panzergranate 40 is only effective against light tanks. Against medium and heavy tanks, the shells are ineffective and bounce off. No confirmed kills were reported with these weapons in recent weeks. One shot was fired with a Stielgranate 41, I discussed that in an earlier video, which missed the tank in the dark and detonated just in front of it. However, the explosion and accompanying fire effect caused the tank to turn away. No confirmed kills with the medium pucks were observed, though enemy tanks often withdrew after coming under fire, as on March 31st, 1942. The medium puck is too slow and immobile. Changing position by manpower alone is nearly impossible under current terrain conditions. Note, this was in March 1942, so it was basically muddy everywhere. It's quite interesting here that they claim that even the 5 centimeter puck is actually too immobile already. I mean, this was a big theme of German anti-tank guns, that they got bigger and bigger and less and less mobile, logically, with the Pak 40 basically having to be towed and often falling into enemy hands if a position was lost. So, recommendations for Pak deployment and use: strive for flanking positions and delay opening fire as long as possible. Always fire, even with low chances of success. This can disrupt or deter enemy tanks. Additional supply of Stielgranate 41 is urgently needed. Paks must be mobile and terrain capable, so they can be concentrated when enemy tanks attack. Assignment of towing vehicles is top priority. Goes on here. Anti-tank defense using artillery. Enemy tanks are highly vulnerable to concentrated artillery fire and advance only hesitantly when under it. Single gun positions are also effective. Experience shows that the 10 cm gun with special AP ammunition, red tip, can penetrate all types of enemy tanks. However, the special ammunition was not available. Observations on March 29 showed that older anti-tank shells bounced off T-34s at a range of 400 meters. Worn-out barrels and degraded sighting equipment negatively impacted accuracy. And then again here, recommendations for artillery deployment. A well-organized tank warning system in constant readiness to fire must be ensured to trigger artillery fire immediately. Use well-positioned individual guns, preferably 10 cm cannons and light field howitzers with a red tip special ammunition. Towing vehicles are essentially to reposition guns quickly to sectors threatened by enemy tanks. Then goes on here, anti-tank defense using 8.8 cm flak. A major disadvantage is the high silhouette of the gun, which makes it easy to spot. This complicates relocating the gun. However, penetration is sufficient against all types of enemy tanks. And lastly, we look at the infantry. Anti-tank defense using infantry. Recent battles have shown that tank attacks are usually accompanied by enemy infantry. Friendly infantry who remained in their positions and allowed themselves to be overrun by tanks were able to effectively fight the following enemy infantry. Enemy tanks were also engaged with Molotov cocktails, flamethrowers from frontline resistance nests, and could have been attacked by tank killer squads. This was indeed feasible. Recommendations for use and equipment. Strongly suppress panic or fear of tanks, Panzer Schreck. Now note, this Panzer Schreck is not the rocket launcher, this means Panzer Fright. Experience has shown that troops who stayed in foxholes and let tanks roll over them suffered only light casualties, 2 dead, while a company that abandoned its position suffered heavy losses, 13 dead. Therefore, immediate and thorough entrenchment is essential, even for heavy weapons, artillery and machine guns. Troops must remain in position and let tanks pass over them. All resistance nests should be equipped with Molotov cocktails, explosives, concentrated charges, T-mines, and, if possible, flamethrowers. Pre-laid mines had no success. Enemy tanks either bypassed them or pushed the mines aside in deep snow. No observed effect. This report includes this sketch of a battle at Bayrak that this report referenced. There were 9 enemy tanks that were destroyed. Now, it's due to it being in black and white, it's kind of hard to get it all together, so I took the liberty and went on Google Earth and I marked all the tank wrecks there, and I will read out how these were knocked out and at what range. I was able to find the little village of Bayrak in Ukraine. Now, if we zoom out a little bit, you can quite clearly see, once everything loads in, that it is close to Kharkov here, near the river. And these were all the tank wrecks that the Germans had a look at here. There's no photographs, as far as I can tell, at least not in this folder. So first one here was a BT tank. It was the first one to be knocked out on the 27th of March 1942. All the others later, I will not mention that again, were knocked out on the 29th of March 1942, so a bit later. So this was the first one. Type BT. Weapon was 7.5 centimeter red, so special ammo. 900 meters range, hit into the side, but there's a question mark. Then the second tank here, BT, 5 centimeter long. Range was 300 meters, and it was hit both in the hull and the turret. Then number 3, the one bit apart from the others, was also a BT, hit by a 5 centimeter gun long, 600 meter, also hit in the turret and in the hull. Then over here, no, wait, where am I? Over here, number 4. Now it gets interesting. This was a T-34, hit by a 7.5 centimeter special ammo, and number 5 was also T-34, 7.5 centimeter special ammo. Both were hit at 900 meters, and it says here that both of them actually drove under fire into a swamp and bogged down then when they then were ditched by the crew, so they weren't technically destroyed or knocked out. And you can actually see this area is along this creek that goes into this reservoir, whatever that is. So this was probably a boggy, swampy terrain that these two tanks drove into and got stuck. We'll carry on with number 6. This was another BT, 5 centimeter long, 1,100 meter range, hit in the hull. Then 7, another BT, was hit both by a 7.5 centimeter red and a 5 centimeter long, 1,000 meters turret. And then finally the last one up here, another BT, 7.5 centimeter red and 5 centimeter long at 1,000 meters into the hull. So these were the tanks that were knocked out here, and the location of the wrecks. Sadly, as I said, no photographs. Lastly, in the same folder, there is a report also on anti-tank warfare by Jäger Regiment 49, which apparently was forwarded to the 3rd Panzer Division. And it says here, it's a report on the combat success of Obergefreiter Czernek and Gefreiter Reckzügel. From the 10th Company Jäger Regiment 49, and they were using, and this is interesting, the heavy anti-tank rifle 41, so Schwere Panzerbüchse 41, against Soviet tanks. This is this weapon here from the Saumur Tank Museum. Now, this gun was part of a series of 3 guns that the Germans introduced in 1941-1942. And these all use the what the Germans called the Gerlich principle, and basically a conical barrel that smooshes together the anti-tank round as it leaves the barrel, thus leading to way higher velocity and way better penetration, even if the round is relatively small. So this one had a caliber of 2.8 centimeter only, but quite good penetration. There was also a 4.7 centimeter gun and even a 7.5 centimeter Pak 41. Which was one of the most effective in terms of penetration anti-tank guns that the Germans had. However, production of these was cut short because in order to make the special ammunition to use in these conical barrels, you need tungsten, or Wolfram as it is called in German, which is like a heavy metal. The Germans needed that for that ammunition, but also for many other things, I think including welding, stuff like that. But they didn't have a reliable source of it on their territory. So even though these were developed and were quite effective, they were then ditched. This was actually one of the attempts by the Germans to solve that problem that I talked about earlier, of having to have bigger and bigger anti-tank guns that were more and more immobile. As you can see, this is a pretty small weapon that could be manhandled quite easily. Interestingly, the Allies used that too, to a degree. For example, the British had a so-called Little John adapter that could be used with a 2-pounder gun, for example, on Tetrarch tanks, or I think some armored cars as well, that made them quite good against tanks, even though the gun at this point was with 40mm was quite outdated. So this was in 1944. But yeah, the Allies, of course, had a bigger supply of tungsten. Anyway, let's read the actual report. So, this is a bit later. During Soviet tank attacks on April 9th and April 11th, 1942, the main body of enemy tanks broke into the main combat zone at the southern tip of the lake located south of Khorasan. Due to terrain depressions, hollows, the tanks could not initially be observed from the position of the anti-tank rifle team. They were only spotted once they had already passed to the rear left of the anti-tank position. Some were even on their return route from the battalion command post back towards their own lines. And then it says here, all enemy tanks were not engaged from the front, but rather attacked from the flank or rear. The weapon employed was the s.PzB 41 heavy anti-tank rifle, model 41. And these are the types that were destroyed by date and person manning it. So on the 9th of April 42, they destroyed 9 T-26C, which I think was the latest type of T-26, 7 by Obergefreiter Czernek and 2 by Gefreiter Reckzügel, and also 2 BT-7 and 1 each, right? And then on the 11th of April, there were 4 T-60 tanks that were destroyed. And it says here that Obergefreiter Czernek was unable to aim or fire due to a gunshot wound to the arm sustained on April 9th. So these were all by Gefreiter Reckzügel. And now here they show again the combat ranges and also how much ammunition they used. I will just zoom in because I don't want to read out all of it. So you can read that yourself if you're interested. But the way you read this is here, 1 T-26C, approximately 70 meters, 3 shots, right? So then the other 3 more T-26C, 100 meters, 3 shots, and so on. And it says here then, at the end, with the exception of 3 vehicles, all destroyed tanks burned out completely after being hit. And it goes on the second page. On April 9th, 1942, a KV-1 44-ton heavy tank approached from the rear towards the evening. It had been unsuccessfully targeted earlier that day. As it retreated, it was engaged again with approximately 12 rounds at 50 meters. A light smoke trail was seen emerging from the rear of the tank as it drove back towards its own lines and then disappeared. And on April 11th, 1942, a burning T-60 approached from the rear. After receiving 2 hits, the crew abandoned the vehicle. These last 2 tanks were not officially recorded by 10th Company as destroyed or damaged. And yeah, it was sent to the 3rd Panzer Division. So this is why it's in this folder. I don't think the Jäger Division folder survived Stalingrad, I'm not sure. Anyway, found this quite interesting, some mid-war anti-tank combat. Thanks for watching, have a nice day.